So it seems that the leaked list of Warhammer 40k detachments is true, and today's offering brings some rather big buffs for the Blood Angels Death Company. Let's talk about what we've got. Is this a new third solid option for competitive Blood Angels? Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today it seems we're talking Sons of Sanguinius, Games Workshop delivering on one of my wishlist items in some help for Death Company focused armies, and a detachment that certainly seems strong enough to be interesting. This year's Grotma's calendar isn't giving us a detachment for every single Warhammer 40k faction, but instead 6 of them. So far we've had a really strong one for the Guard, plus an interesting one that directly levels up the Night Lord's Dread Talons one. We know that there's going to be a balanced day slate dropping sometime this week, and today we've got a Blood Angels detachment called the Rage-Cursed Onslaught. That name further confirms the leaked list of them that we had. This list that I believe was originally from Goonhammer leaked out a couple of days back. A Blood Angels Rage-Cursed Onslaught was one of the ones we're supposed to be getting, so that means that we can now be pretty certain that the next few are going to be Space Wolves, Emperor's Children and Harlequins. In my opinion, those are all potentially interesting ones that have the capacity to do some good for their factions. For the Space Wolves, it's probably going to be themed around their elites. It'd be nice to have one that's fairly solidly stronger than Gladius and Stormlance for their core army. The lists playing Space Wolves at the highest level generally tend to use those over the Saga of the Beastslayer at the moment, which doesn't feel ideal. Not that the latter doesn't have some strong stuff. The Emperor's Children one implies Fulgrim himself and his higher-ups. It would certainly be good to have something to make Fulgrim himself a little bit stronger on the battlefield. He's pretty much the only unique Emperor's Children unit that really doesn't see too much competitive play. If they could add some internal faction balance at the same time, that'd be all well and good. Almost everyone plays Coterie of the Conceited for them. Then finally we've got the Serpent's Brood Harlequins. The name might be a generic one, or it could imply them fighting from transports potentially. They just really need anything they can to make an army that focuses on them significantly better, really. Hopefully between that there's some good stuff over the next few days. Today though, we're focusing on the Blood Angels. They're the chapter of the angelic warriors of Sanguinius, noble heroes beset by tragic twin flaws. Maybe drawing the short straw compared with some of their other divergent chapter counterparts in the 10th edition refreshes. Kind of a shame they haven't got their full release of a proper Death Company kit yet, and their rather badly received Sanguinary Guard left some things to be desired. Though at the moment I do find them really quite fun to play in game right now. Both their unique units and their Liberator Assault Group detachments are pretty fun. Hitting hard with a +2 strength and +1 attack is nice, and they've got some good supporting rules, and Angelic Inheritors is also a very good detachment as well. Nice buffs focusing around characters, and a few more subtle tricks with that one. Not every single one of their data sheets is super standout, though the majority are usable enough. One of my main criticisms with the army at the moment though was that they'd made a detachment for them in the Codex called the Lost Brethren for the Death Company, and it just didn't really do enough to support a Death Company themed army out there. Almost all the rules being locked to Death Company themselves, and then not really providing enough buffs and damage output to justify locking down to those datasheets. It was definitely something I was hoping they'd look into if they did revisit Blood Angels. Perhaps more expecting some rules tweaks to the Lost Brethren themselves, though as with the new version of the Dread Talons that we got the other day, it seems that Games Workshop are preferring to just release some entire new detachments this time around. The one that they've got today is called the Rage-Cursed Onslaught. When I talked about it the other day, I did feel like it was just a bit generic Blood Angels anger here. Blood Angels both have the Red Thirst and the Black Rage, the Red Thirst perhaps being their more normal genetic flaw with more anger and battle bloodlust than you'd expect, and going into a rage state, and then the somewhat similar but more insidious threat of the Black Rage, being haunted by visions of their dying Primarch Sanguinius and descending into madness, bloodlust and a berserk rampage, joining the Death Company from which there's no return and seeking an honourable death in combat. It seems that this detachment is actually being deliberately a little bit vague. Although it does have some nods to the Death Company, it's not exclusive to them. They said that it's aimed to reflect both the Red Thirst and the Black Rage out in full force, and that the detachment is aimed to appeal to armies with a large amount of Death Company in them. There are some rules that are locked to them, though not all of them. As a result, the detachment still at least somewhat general purpose. They do have a leaning towards Death Company stuff, but plenty of other support as well. A few of the rules are lifted from the Death Company detachment or elsewhere, but it doesn't feel like quite so much of a direct rewrite compared with Dread Talons like we got the other day. Jumping into it, and first up their core rule I think is nice enough, called Maddened Ferocity. The Lost Brethren Death Company one was locked to them only, and then damage buffs as your unit takes damage, which isn't super helpful. This one applies to all Blood Angels units, not just Death Company ones, and it gives you at least a fair amount of melee power buffs like Liberator, though ones of a slightly different flavour. First up, you just get 2 reroll wound rolls of 1 in melee full stop, and that bit's not tied to charging unlike the Liberator Assault Group buffs, so it does mean that if your Blood Angels are charged here, they'll be hitting back just that tiny bit harder. Usually that's a 16% damage buff on its own, which isn't enormous, but not nothing. Having it on the wound rolls helps out, as it won't interfere with either Oath of Moment or Death Company units. They'll be re-rolling hits anyway, and it's basically equally effective against everything, provided your unit doesn't have Twin Linked or something. Then the second part of the rule is kind of similar to Liberator. You get +1 attack on the charge, and then that's boosted to a +2 attacks on the charge if you're battle shocked. The +1 attack on the charge is just solid and will help against everything. Just having that one at base certainly helps the detachment compete with Liberator, and you weren't getting any sort of damage buffs for just intact Death Company units on the charge previously. It means that overall every single unit will be hitting significantly harder here compared with standard Space Marines. The battle shock bit is kind of rare for it to come up on its own, though I guess it might from time to time. The biggest deal for that one is that Light Liberator Assault Group, there's a couple of stratagems that you can basically double dip on and become automatically battle shocked, and that means that those stratagems, if you give in to the Red Thirst there, you'll get an extra attack essentially out of them, and provided you don't need to be doing objective things or using further stratagems, that's going to make those ones absolutely enormously powerful. You've got the potential to be rolling a fairly spectacular amount of dice with this one. Overall, I'd certainly not say it's better than Liberator Assault Group, but at least it's a core rule that's playing on far more the same sort of level. Just standard Blood Angels units with say about 4 attacks will have around about an extra plus 45% damage output when you're on the charge, and that'll be happening into literally all targets. And you get a smaller damage buff when your units haven't charged, which you don't in Liberator. Not having the inbuilt +2 strength thing will be a big deal both for strength 4 and strength 8 models, where they reach some very nice breakpoints with +2 strength. They get better against a lot of the more common targets in Warhammer 40k that way. Against certain mid-level targets though, it's not the biggest advantage in the world. Liberator confers around plus 56% damage boost to say a 4 attack unit that was wounding on a 4+ going to wounding on a 3, but it has a bit more of an outsize effect if you went from a 6 to a 5 or a 5 to a 4. Overall, if the detachment was just the core rule alone, I still probably rate Liberator just that little bit better, but this one really isn't significantly far behind, and nice to have a Death Company themed detachment that doesn't just literally help out Death Company, this will help out your Sanguinary Guard and friends as well. Before we move on to stratagems and enhancements, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Greytide Studio and their Crimson Lord upgrades. These ones aiming to add a bit of angelic heroes and power armor style theme. They both sell 3D printer STLs and some physical bits pack that can be bought print on demand from Only Games. There'll be links down in the video description. Their main offerings are core sets that has 300 or so bits for around $79 all included. Or you can buy the parts individually in different sets. They've got some nice bits that could work well enough for Death Company. Lots of fun cross shoulder pads and other motifs and things. Definitely a gap in the market for that now. I really quite enjoyed their ancient armor style bits to add a little bit more theme to Dreadnoughts. In particular, some of their most popular things are their winged jump packs. That was a big criticism of certain golden armor models that were released recently, and I must admit I did enjoy the bits myself on my own miniatures. They've got loads of other stuff though, plenty of options for heads, other shoulder pads, and various other theme bits like hammers and shields. Check them out, link down in the video description below if you'd like to, and thanks to them for sponsoring this one. Let's move on with some angry Space Marine stratagems though. As per normal, we have Armour of Contempt here for 1 command point, worsening AP of enemy attacks, though just against the 1 unit as per the balanced data slate. They've not chosen to take this one away here like they did for certain Space Wolf detachments. It's definitely handy enough to be able to flex into. Nice for Sanguinary Guard with their 2+ saves, good for Death Company with no invulnerable saves, and could be quite powerful if the opponent tries to charge and take something out, and this allows your units to survive and swing back. For 1 command point, we've got Insensate Rage. I feel like this one's probably the weakest one of the new ones, and it just sounds better than it is. It means that Death Company, when they get attacked, go from a 6+ feel no pain to a 5+1. It's usable in the shooting and fight phase, but the main issue with it is that it just doesn't really increase durability as much as it sounds like, just because you already have that 6+ feel no pain even if you don't use the stratagem. For the most simple examples with Death Company Marines just taking 1 damage apiece, or for big multi-wound things like the Death Company Dreadnought, it only actually adds basically plus 25% durability to your unit, and really quite a lot of the time that's going to be less than Armour of Contempt's going to add, and particularly so against big multi-damage things hitting regular Death Company, say damage 3 or more. It's not completely useless, but if taking damage from just 1 unit, Armour of Contempt is almost always going to be around about the same sort of value, if not better. Probably the biggest niche that this one has is if you've got some Death Company out in the open and they're just about to get lit up by 2 different important shooting units in the enemy shooting phase. This one could wind up having more effects than Armour of Contempt, as you get to keep the effect for the entire phase. It will be quite a nice feels good one if you have Lamatis in the unit worsening damage as well. Next up for 1 command point, we've got a Grim Warning. This one gives you sticky objectives on death for a Blood Angels keyword unit that was controlling an objective. Sticky objectives being pretty handy to have, and this one's super nice given that it can basically directly score you victory points or force the opponent to do something about it and potentially move their units into more vulnerable locations just literally due to the threat of you having this stratagem. And bear in mind that this one is only locked to Blood Angels keyword units, unlike most of the rest of the things, and that does mean that you can't use it on things like, say, Space Marine Scouts or Jump Intercessors, which might be really good targets for it, and as a result it isn't quite as mainstream as you'd hope for. But say if you had some Death Company or Sanguinary Guard or an objective of just jump forward, kill an enemy unit, and then the opponent shoots them down in return, if your opponent's not moved something up to actually take that objective, then basically you can rest easy and you can know that it's yours. Next up is a seriously strong one called Limb from Limb. This one either gives you +1 strength to your melee attacks or +1 AP to your melee attacks. +1 AP just by itself is pretty usable as a melee stratagem. Plenty of things are going to get significantly more dangerous with that around, particularly into enemies with high saves. The thing that makes this one super stand out though is that as with Liberator Assault Group, you can choose both of those effects and get both damage buffs at the price of automatically getting battle shocked, which in this detachment gives you a further buff on top of that, as it'll give you yet another attack on the charge. The +1 strength will sometimes matter big, it sometimes won't, but the extra AP and extra attack are both seriously nice, and between the stack of buffs you'll have some seriously hard-hitting units. Say just a standard Death Company Marine with a chainsword goes to strength 5, AP -2, damage 1 with a big 6 attacks, and then they'll be re-rolling all hit rolls from their datasheet rule, and then even re-rolling wound rolls of 1 with this. Another really good target for this one seems to be Sanguinary Guard with the Lances. With this stratagem on the go, they hit pretty well as hard as Liberator. They get a big 6 attacks on the charge, hitting at weapon skill 2+ at strength 7, AP -3 and damage 2 with a +1 to wounds, and then even on top of that you'll get a reroll wound rolls of 1. They're perhaps a particularly tempting target with the Battle Shock debuff as well, given that they'll still have some OC with their banner. Overall, it's a really strong general purpose melee damage dealer. It does mean that compared with Liberator though, you don't have the easy access to lance and lethal hits that one gets, and that is a particularly punchy combo for Blood Angels units, allowing them to punch up against things they'd be wounding on 5s or 6s. Next up for 2 command points is Deathless Duty. This one's a Death Company locked one, and it gives you fights on death, nominated just after the enemy unit has declared their attacks. This one being unit locked might be a touch frustrating, and given that standard captains with their command point discounts can't join the Death Company, you can't threaten this for 1 CP. But if you are taking a bunch of Death Company units, as this detachment encourages, then that's going to be really quite a powerful thing that you can do against enemy melee armies. You could potentially have Death Company units that jump in, kill a bunch of stuff, and then if the opponent's only got melee things to be able to deal with them, those melee things are probably going to be taking some pretty serious casualties in return from the Death Company striking back as they're taken down. The extra feel no pain thing helps out Death Company, though I feel like this one's maybe the most solid reason to include more Death Company units in your army than you might do in other detachments. Then finally for 1 command point we've got Red Wrath, and again this one's a very good one in this detachment. First up it gives you advance and charge, which is just pretty excellent in any assault army, really helpful to allow it to compete with Liberator a bit better. Alternatively you can use it to advance and shoot, and again that can have some value for gunline units. In Blood Angels you're more likely to use it for advance and charge, so if you need to get a Vindicator, a crucial line of sight or something, all well and good. And for a mixed role unit you can take Battle Shock to have both of them on the go. Having the option to take Battle Shock though is just interesting because it triggers the +2 attacks thing in the detachment rule. So basically if you have a unit that you need to advance and charge, you can automatically take Battle Shock, and then this stratagem suddenly becomes not only something that increases your charge threat range, but also becomes a damage dealer stratagem as well. Between the two of those, that's potentially really quite a big deal. Extra threat range and extra damage all in 1 command point, though I would bear in mind that if you're using this and you get battle shocked, it means that you won't be able to command point reroll a charge once you're trying to make it, and that could wind up being genuinely quite bad if you're trying to make a somewhat long charge, which you normally would be if you're trying to advance and charge in the first place. It's definitely interesting and very tempting to add on that +1 attack, but I feel like there might be times when people want that extra attack and then just wind up never making the charge in the first place because they roll snake eyes and aren't able to mitigate that. Moving on to the enhancements, and first up we have Carmine Reliquary. Looks like this one's being reported at a big 30 points. It's chaplain only and gives the bearer's units a scout 6 inches and the ability to re-roll battle shock tests within 6 inches of this model. The scout 6 inches is pretty threatening just by itself. You could have a big jump pack Death Company unit stage really quite aggressively in a mid-board ruin. You could easily be making some first turn charges there, or just move up any other scary unit into the midfield. Being chaplain only feels not disastrous in this detachment, as the +1 to wound does look like it'd genuinely be very useful in taking down tough stuff. And the leader to bore is kind of interesting in 2 ways. You could try and reroll in the normal way to make sure that you pass things, though if Battle Shock's not going to harm you too much, you could reroll and hope to fail if you do want to give into the red thirst a bit more and hit the enemy extra hard with more attacks. At 30 points though, you really are paying quite a big premium for that 6-inch scout move. Next up, for 25 points, we've got Master of the Red Thirst. This one's simple and very effective with once per battle fights first, essentially the same as the one in the Liberator Assault group here. Fights first again is a really big problem for melee armies, and again if your opponent doesn't have too much shooting, this could make a big block of Death Company into a really big problem, potentially jumping on one of their units and destroying it, and then maybe bringing down another when the enemy charges them to destroy them in return. It does feel like you could have quite a lot of counter melee on the go in this detachment if you wanted to. This enhancement in one squad, as you just hear with some Blade Guard elsewhere maybe, and you could be threatening fight on death for a Death Company unit. Enemy demons, orcs and world eaters might not be enjoying that. Next up, and for a rather expensive one, we've got the Sanguinary tier. This one gives you an aura of +1 strength to the weapons of Death Company units within 6 inches of the bearer, and it appears that this one doesn't exclude ranged weapons as well. So it looks like you're buffing Intercessor, bolt rifles and grenade launchers as well, and not just the chainswords and the eviscerators and melee weapons. You could have some strength 10 multi-melters on the go with the Death Company Dreadnought too. That's definitely interesting, and with a big 6-inch aura, you could be putting that to help out really quite a big chunk of the army. Maybe you could even have that present on a combi lieutenant lurking somewhere within the lines. You might be able to combine that with a Stratagem that gives you +1 strength and all those stats melee buffs. That might be helpful to help you tip the balance against those certain toughness breakpoints. I feel like a lot of the time though it could just be applying to literally one unit, unless you're managing to make 2 melees happen side by side or something. And for 35 points that does feel a bit on the pricey side for that. It is kind of a fun thought to do some sort of slightly weird strength 5 bolter Death Company gun line though. Probably not very sensible, and standard Intercessor double shooting is all very good as well, but for a fun unit idea to try out, it could be good for a few casual games. Then finally for 25 points we've got the Angel's Fan, and this one's a fighting enhancement that improves a character's melee. Your character's melee attacks get sustained hits too versus character, monster or vehicle units. It is perhaps just a bit on the frustrating side that isn't against all targets, it's just a select amount of them. A lot of the units in the enemy army are likely to be one of those 3 things, but there's plenty of things that you might want to destroy in 40k that won't have a character lead in them. It's maybe just a bit painful that for a big 25-point investment it's not just a bit more reliable than that, and could be kind of painful if your captain's charging in and doesn't unlock this buff. My first thought for this one feels like it'd be nice on something like a foot captain in either Stern Guard or Assault Intercessors, and then do the thing where you have the big +3 attacks, devastating wounds, and then capitalise on the rerolls that those units give you. Any free stratagems or buffs from the detachment rule are all well and good as well. If you've got some full rerolls either from Death Company or Oath of Moment, then it means this will usually math out to try and fish for those big 6s. Just reroll everything that isn't a 6, and you're likely to end up with slightly more hits if you were hitting on a 2+ to start with. Overall, I feel like Games Workshop have done a fairly solid job with this detachment. As I've said a few times, one of the things that I thought Blood Angels really could do with was a rework of the Death Company detachment. This isn't really quite that, but it's a detachment in maybe a similar sort of style, maybe halfway between the Death Company one and Liberator. And I think it's really quite nice to have the detachment rule just not wholly locked to only Death Company units and just slanted that way, and a lot more powerful to boot. I feel like there's multiple things to like about this one. The core damage rule is nice enough, maybe not quite at Liberator levels, but not far off. It does have some pretty usable counter melee. The fights on death thing is nice for Death Company. The fights first in an enhancement is good. Nice to have advance and charge access, and pretty fun to be able to also be a damage dealer stratagem when it makes sense to. And I feel like potentially getting 1 command point for +1 strength, +1 AP, and +1 attack if you take Battle Shock is a really good deal all around. The sticky on death one's going to come up as well. Overall, at first impressions, I'd still guess that it's probably not going to be the single strongest Blood Angels detachment around. I wouldn't suspect that it's going to outcompete Angelic Inheritors or the Liberator Assault group, but I feel like if you do want to make this one work, and particularly run a Death Company heavy army, it's got enough good stuff to sell it. Perhaps the main weakness is feeling like it doesn't have quite as much scope to punch up against really tough targets. You don't get the +2 strength on the charge, and you don't have the lance and lethal stratagem that Liberator does, so it might encourage a few more regular chaplains, maybe lieutenants for lethal hits, or sanguinary guard with lances perhaps. Not having fallback and charge is perhaps a bit of a shame as well. That can be a very big deal for Blood Angels units that survive melee. And while this one is massively freer than the regular Death Company one, some important stratagems are locked to Death Company or the Blood Angels keyword, and it will tempt you to focus far more on those compared with more generic Blood Angels units. Overall, at first impressions though, it seems enough to be interesting, and it doesn't look like one of the absolute failures of a Grotmus detachment like some of the detachments that we had last time around. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts and takes on it though, let me know them down in the comments. That's about it for this one. I suppose we'll be talking either Space Wolves, Harlequins or Emperor's Children tomorrow, so check back for that. And I'll just finish up with a big thank you to Greytide Studios Crimson Lord Upgrades for sponsoring the video. You can find them linked in the video description. As mentioned, they do have really quite a lot of cool stuff. Lots of things that could be used on all sorts of model kits, plus some really nice things with their ancient armor, wings jump packs, and some cross panels for your angry space marines. There'll be links down in the video description if you want to check out their range. That's it for this one though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel and keep the videos coming, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. You can find that linked in the video description down below. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.